Welcome to the Life, Legacy, and Leadership podcast. I have a special guest today, the Keith DeSonier from the Bronco Bunkhouse.
Hello. All right.
So just to let you know, Keith has kids here at Brook Hill, so we got the second generation DeSoniers are here. Keith was a legacy counselor. He is a physician's assistant in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. That's kind of his pedigree. We're going to talk a lot about leadership and all the good things with Keith. So, Keith, glad to have you on the podcast, man.
I'm glad to finally be able to make it and be here.
Awesome. Well, so what brought you to Brook Hill? Where are you from? How'd you get here?
So that's actually a great story. So it started off originally from Lake Charles, Louisiana, and from there it started off with just one family that was friend of a friend that came back. They actually told our family about it, my older sister, so she was the first one from our family to go. And then from there, eventually became my turn to come through the ranks. I was always a 2-week camper. I'm so thrilled that Brook Hill brought the 2-week camp back because I was a 2-weeker for life my entire career here. I've never missed a single 2-week during my entire career. So it was fantastic. When it first came back, I said, kids, hey, we're not doing the 1 week anymore. Y'all are only doing 2 weeks from here on. So started doing that. That was early 90s is when that first started years and years ago, back when the world was a little different of a place back then. So then for years went all the way through as a camper. Started up my very first bunkhouse. I was in a Hackney's.
Yeah, with?
I was with Monty Mansour.
Yep.
From there, went on James Steen, Pirtle. I knew all those guys back then. Eventually Crowder, my JCT year, that was a very impactful year for me. Just met so many guys along the way. It was really, really wonderful. It was actually Crowder, my JCT year, he was the first one that was actually really helped me get a grasp on Christianity as a whole.
Wow.
And he and I remember sitting on one of the big stones right behind Vespers, and we were just talking one night, and he was just kind of sharing just different aspects of the gospel with me, different aspects of the Bible, really. I was telling him some struggles that I was having, and he was just like, hey, man, did you know the Bible even speaks to that? And I'm like, no, I never really read it on my own, right? Just people tell me about it. And so he was like, hey, I'm going to get you some verses or whatnot, and just see what you think. I'm reading Bible for myself for the first time, and I'm like, lights are just clicking on. And I'm like, okay, so there's something to this. Fast forward, got to graduate year, and I was just like, okay, I need to actually, rubber's hitting the road. I can see there's a fork coming in my life path, and I was just like, I need to make a choice. I can go one way or I can go another. And I was feeling a tug towards following God and following Christ. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna do this. We're jumping in. At that point in time, kind of along the way, we started bringing some friends along with me as well. I tried to bring some of my cousins and different family members and so forth. Some of them kind of went a couple of years and then kind of fell away. But then we started growing a little bit of a cohort from Lake Charles that started coming a little bit more faithfully. And then really when it came back after that graduate year, my little one of my best friends in the world, he and I, we just said, we're going to do this. We're going to make it happen. So get into high school, and we said, all right, we're going to make a difference. We're just going to start doing basically Brook Hill, but in Lake Charles. We're just going to live the way that they do at Brook Hill, and here's where we're going to make this happen. Brought some more people along the way, and just all of a sudden, just God was doing amazing things down in Lake Charles. And then next thing we know, I mean, just truckloads and truckloads of kids coming from Lake Charles all over the place, every camp session. I mean, got to the point as started off a JC year, was offered 1 week and then just hit it off, and God was moving. And so we were like, okay, well, I got invited back for a second week, and I called my folks. I'm like, hey, Mom, Dad, can I stay? Can I do another week? And they're like, well, you don't have anything going on. Sure, stay. So do that. And then they asked me for another week, and they're like, can I stay again? They were like, do you have enough clothes? And I'm like, they got a laundromat here. I'll just go wash all my clothes. It's fine. And anyway, so I ended up staying a lot to a point where my folks were like, okay, you've been there too long. You need to come home. We weren't planning on you being gone all summer. And so I was like, fine. Okay. So actually stayed through the 2 week that particular year. At that point, 2 week was right in the middle of the summer. And so that they took the week off, and I just, that was my year that year. And then just year after year, just more and more groups from Lake Charles just started coming, and it was really, really phenomenal. I mean, God was doing some amazing things, just in the town, but let alone here at camp itself. And so that's kind of what got me into the pipeline of being counselor. Made it finally to my AC summer, just spending time, just extra time with all the senior counselors at that point, hanging out with them on the weekends, just doing everything I can, just soaking up everything they had to talk about, all the teachings that they could offer me, just soaking it up like a sponge. It was really, really just a sweet, sweet, sweet time. Eventually got up to counselor level, took over the Bronco bunkhouse after Simon Knighton, the great Simon Knighton.
That's right.
And then from there, it was actually during my AC year. If you recall, you and I were together. You were a senior counselor. I was an AC that particular summer. Kind of got to know you as you were going through your ranks, as I was just a year behind you or so. But had a chance that we were actually on all summer staff together a couple of years. Senior counselor, I think just 1 year maybe we were together. But anyway, took over the Bronco bunkhouse and loved it. It was great. It was fantastic. During that time, I was going to college at that point, and so what was really, really neat is I got involved with a group at college. I went to college, Christian Brothers University out of Memphis, Tennessee, and it was one of these things where they didn't have a lot, even though Christian was in the name, didn't have a lot of Christian presence on campus. And so I was like, I had heard a couple of sermons that were either talked about here at camp or church or whatnot, and they were talking about how, one of Satan's real big plans is tries to like create islands around people, make you feel like you're by yourself. And I was like, well, yeah, I need community, need to find something. So it was a struggle at first to kind of find something. And at one point it was just like, okay, well, we did this in Lake Charles. Let's build community. Okay, let's find people. I don't know how. Maybe there's got to be another Christian on campus somewhere. No idea.
Absolutely.
And so started praying about it. Always a good thing to do. And then next thing I know, started meeting a couple of people and whatnot. And we were like, okay, well, let's start a Bible study. Okay, great. Well, next thing we know, a couple of people are just like, hey, these guys are kind of into this kind of stuff too. Okay. So now it's kind of growing a little bit. Then we found out some kind of benefits. There's a lot of big churches around there. So we're like, okay. Got hooked up with a couple of other big churches and such. And I was actually started working with a portion of Young Life as well. And I was like, hey, there are Christians in this city. Imagine that. And so next thing I know, here I am. I'm doing Brook Hill during the summer. I'm taking a lot of the principles that I learned at Brook Hill, bringing it to my college campus. We're trying to do a lot of the same things here, just meeting together, just some fellowship, moving along, and just trying to, just a lot of fellowship just together. Some Bible training and what have you. None of us were nobody went to seminary or anything like that. We're just reading Bible. We're going through, some study guides together and things, coupling it with some of the churches that we were going to as well. I mean, it was a neat time. It was a time where you really had a chance to kind of redefine yourself and kind of really practice your faith in an area that was just, you were making it your own at that point in time. At that point, college level, you're starting to feel more like an adult, right? You
Absolutely.
Got a little more experience under your belt. And then there was a secondary group that started showing up on campus, and it had to do with, I can't even remember the name of it, but it was kind of like a counseling kind of group for incoming students. And it's funny enough is they actually wanted us all wearing red T-shirts, and so it was doing like those entry weeks for all the incoming classes and all the new students and everything. Make them welcome, meet with them on a regular basis, make sure everything was going well. And I'm like, this is kind of weird. This is kind of just like Brook Hill. And fascinating enough, my last project with there that they did was twofold. One. We had to do a training session, just very much like what counselors do, like right before the start of this summer sessions. Get everybody together, do team building, everybody get to know each other, because we knew if we could make the team strong, in general, everything else would go a lot better throughout the years. We're doing all these exercises and things with the new students. So I took a lot of the team building exercises that we did at camp, and that second year that we were there, they had a program where they were bringing people in, outside people in that they were paying to be, bailed on them the last minute. And so the director of the program was just like, I don't know what we're going to do now. I said, hey, I know a lot of this kind of stuff. Let me just lead a bunch of things. So I took a lot of the team building exercises that we do at camp And I just led it for a whole week. And we learned how to just work as a team, do these little trial and error things, do these, all these trust exercises, all these kind of other things, and learn how to talk to people. We talked about, other people have brought other things to the table. I wasn't doing it all by myself by any means, but I brought a lot of kind of structure to it and said, okay, this is just what we do, right? This is just how you do this kind of stuff. So went through all that, and then the final capstone portion of it was I kind of riffed off that was when I think it was the summer. That summer, the summer before, is when the Red Legacy T-shirt poem
John
Thomas's poem came out. And so I was like, hey, we're going to kind of take a riff off of this. Forgive me for plagiarism, but we're going to go ahead and riff off of this, and I'm just going to apply it to this scenario because we're wearing red T-shirts here. And I was like, all right, let's make this happen. And of course, turned it in, got a bunch of the students with me, some of the senior leaders that were in that group that particular year. And we said, okay, let's submit this and whatnot. And of course, the leader of the program, she was like, this is beautiful. This is great. We're going to take this on in future years and stuff. And, y'all really embodied in this writings of everything that we needed to. And I was like, I did kind of fess up at the end. I was like, I actually borrowed this from, a different source, but I felt a lot of the principles that we did here is where exactly the similar principles of what the original poem was intended. So kind of took a lot of that information from there. And she was just like, well, it's beautiful either way, and we're going to use it. I was like, hey, great. This is great. So that was a lot of fun. So went all the way through. So, gosh, that was 4 years senior counselor in the Broncos. Love that bunkhouse. Fantastic time. Got to meet so many young men from the Hill, not just as campers, but other counselors I got to work with. When you're here at Brook Hill, it really is just a time where on so many different levels, you make so many connections, so many deep memories that I have with all these other counselors that I was with. Quite a many from even some of the campers that, just impact you along the way.
Absolutely.
People that you just really connect with, that were just, things run really, really deep and really, really long. I cherish every moment that I had here. I mean, really, really fantastic. I had to, for different reasons after college, had to kind of regroup, was kind of at that point in time looking for what I wanted to do for a career. So I had to kind of walk away from being around Brook Hill for a while, a lot of the friends and everything, figure out where I wanted to go. When I finally got that kind of landed down, started a career, worked my way to become a physician assistant. Had to go back to some schooling for that. And then was able to, at that point in time, I got married, started having kids, started raising a family, wanted to lay down roots. One of the things, moving to a new city in Dallas-Fort Worth, in reality, we tend to say we like Fort Worth. So we're kind of one of those snobby kind of Fort Worth people.
It's true. I always say things that Tim Barton, Dallas-Fort Worth area, and he's like, no, it's either Dallas or Fort Worth.
Right,
They're not the same thing. I'm like, oh, it's the same thing. He's like, no, it's not.
No, it's really not. Fun story is had a cousin. So I've got a cousin that lives in North Dallas. Right?
Okay.
Was getting married. So all our family, we got my extended family, big family, Southern Louisiana family, so it's a lot of us. So we all like to convene for these kinds of things, get together, kind of use it as de facto family reunions. So had a cousin coming in. He said, hey, yeah, we're going to fly in, and how about this? You guys live over there. Our hotel's over here. We're going to fly in. How about this? We're going to go fly in. We're going to go to Six Flags, and then we're going to drive to you guys. Right. And then we're going to drive back all the way to our hotel. We'll just zip right around, no big deal, whatever else. And I was like, I don't think you know what you're getting into. I don't think you realize how far apart all that is. He's like, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. So he's from kind of the New Orleans area. And I'm like, it's really far what you're talking about.
It's a little different,
here.
New Orleans and Dallas.
Yeah, and so they was no, it's fine. So they do the Six Flags, they do everything else. They're like, yeah, we'll be house for dinner, everything else. Okay, great. So by the time they show up at our house, it's about 10:45 at night. I was like, we got food waiting for you still. And I was like, so they sit down, they just look beat down, dog-tired, dragged out. I mean, it was a hot day, typical Dallas summer. And so Then they leave our house to drive yet another hour to get to North Dallas.
In traffic still at that time.
Yeah, still in traffic. Yep, because that's how it works in the
right.
Metroplex. And so anyway, it was one of those things where you're just like, yeah, y'all don't really recognize how big this place is.
Right.
And there's traffic all the time. But anyway, so moving on forward from there, here we are, building them. And I remember Hetty Lou, good old Hetty Lou, years ago, she said, hey, take just kind of like what the principle that we learned with high school was, take Brook Hill wherever you are.
Build your own Brook Hill.
Build your own Brook Hill wherever you are. It's not anything different. The gospel's the same wherever. The Christian life is the same wherever you are. Just make Brook Hill happen wherever you are. So I was like, okay, yeah, I need to put down some roots down here. I need to make a difference down here. I need to start reaching out and getting some feelers in and so forth. And so for the most part, that's what we've been doing for our time in Fort Worth. I got plugged into a great church. Moved into a neighborhood where we were one of the only young families around there, which was kind of tough at first because I grew up and I had friends just right down the street that you could run and go see everybody all the time. And we didn't have that for my kids. And so I was like, gosh, that's, so my wife and I, we were praying about that for a good bit of time of, Lord, don't know why you brought us to this area. Don't know why we're here, but this is where we are. Why this neighborhood? Over the years, more and more younger families started coming in, met a good neighbor across the street. It looked about, they had a kid about our age of my daughter at the time. We said, okay, hey, come see our church. It was getting near Christmas time. They're just moving in. Young family, so we're like, hey, come see our church. We're doing a Christmas thing. You're welcome to come with us, whatever. Don't know if you're church people or not, but it's just a fun time. It's Christmas stuff. Beautiful place. They come in, they get plugged into the church. Okay, great. Basically their daughter and my daughter, about the same age. They've grown up together, basically it was like we're one giant family. Sisters, neighbor sisters, all this. And just little by little, that pod's starting to kind of grow a little bit bigger and bigger and bigger. Still always loved working with students. Just kind of was working with our kid, our little group. The church community that we were in, they were big promoters of doing like home family unit groups.
Where home group.
You bring a whole bunch of different families together. My wife and I at the time, we had tried a few different groups where it was just the adults that wanted to meet. The kids were all supposed to be away, everything else. And, we were just like, we wanted more than that. So we'd see each other maybe once a month, once every other week or something. And a lot of the groups that we were together, they just weren't super committed. So we were just like, gosh, we want something different. We tried a few different groups, just nothing was really meshing. And then we finally, one of the group people, they were finally saying, okay, well, hey, we're actually moving. Would you mind taking over as like leader for this group? And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll do that. Yeah. So we approached the group and we said, okay, this is the way this group has been designed, up until this point. We're actually looking for something different. We want a little bit more of a buy-in. Right? We want, if this is going to be a family group and this is a group of families, we want us to really know each other, right? We want our kids to know your kids. We want your kids to know us, right? If we're going to be speaking into each other's life as adults, we should be able to speak into each other's kids, right? If we're going to do life as a group here, which that's what the church was really promoting, not just like a social function, we said, okay, well, let's do this. A lot of the group didn't want to do it. So we're like, okay. So that group kind of fizzled. So lo and behold, we kind of were just like, okay, what do we do here? Let's start from zero. We said, hey, we've brought this other couple to the church. Our kids are already friends. Let's start a group with them. And then let's kind of go from there. And then that group size slowly build. There's been pluses and minuses along the way, but there's been kind of a cohort of people that we've all just kind of gotten together and that started melding this group together where we had very similar age kids. And since we did have kind of an across the street kind of connection there, it was like we would get one set of babysitters. All the kids would pile at one house. All the adults would be across the street. So everybody kind of got to know everybody. And everything was really close in case, especially when the kids were really, really little. Moms were really, really close if anything went wrong. So it wasn't he had to drive across town or anything. Dallas-Fort Worth's so big, so didn't have to drive across town. So we said, okay, well, let's just make this happen. And so finally started going, and here we are with it. We've had kind of the same group for about the last 8 years, give or take. Like I said, plus or minus a few couples here and there. Still kind of felt a tugging at my heart where I was just like, okay, I just want to keep going. I still like working with students. I still like working with young people. And so as my oldest started getting a little bit higher in the youth ministry that's there, by the time they got to middle school, I said, you know what? I'm going to volunteer. Church was always putting a call out. We need more volunteers. We need help with our youth ministry. I mean, that's one of the big draws to the church. And we said, okay, well, I want to put in my 2 cents. And so they have a big screening process of what you can do. You know, have you ever had experience with children and all this kind of stuff? And I'm like, well, I'm a dad. They're like, no, that doesn't count. Right. Have you had other experiences as far as training?
A little bit. I
was like, yeah, you did a lot of summer camp for a while. Anyway, so they were just like, okay, well, we've got some other these things. They had a lot of things that they had to do. So they do a really good screening program as far as that goes. And ultimately they said, okay, yeah, so you're in. And they're like, are you? And so then I had to meet with the senior leadership for the, at that point it was middle school. And so I had to meet with the senior leadership and sit down, and they were like, why do you want to do this? And I was like, well, I like working with students, and the church said you got to participate, and I'm here to participate. And they're like, really? Because not a lot of people like to do that. And I'm like, I understand that, but I actually do. Right. And so I like being around students. I like being around youth. So anyway, so started doing that, kind of rose off. We started with one particular group. I've been with this group ever since 5th grade. So these last few years, we're now reaching into high school. So now we're transitioning from middle school ministry into high school ministry now. And I'm really looking forward to it. I've been, starting with a really young group of squirrely guys to see them just that transition that starts to happen during kind of early middle school to later middle school. Oh, it's starting to become young men now.
It's revolutionary.
And it's really phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, the ideas, the concepts are starting to connect. The things that they've been taught, they've been learning all these years, they're starting to put pieces together. We've had a couple of guys start to take ownership of their faith. It's amazing. This last year, I had a young man actually not just take ownership of his faith, ask the Lord Jesus go ahead and be the Lord of his life, and get baptized all in the same year. And you're like, man, wow. Where did this guy come from? This is amazing. Just making great connections there. And then to see where the rest of these guys are going to go in high school is really, really firing me up. It's going to be a really great next few years as they become more and more young men. And some of them have already even started stepping into kind of like what we often would teach back in Brook Hill is, kind of learn from the people ahead of you, but also teach the people what you've learned that are behind you.
That's it.
And that's what you do. And that goes with so many things in life that you're just like, okay, we're passing this on. So now they've been learning all these years, and we've got a few guys in the group that are starting to give back. And they're helping with the younger students as well now, which is really just phenomenal to see. I think that right there is just the body of Christ at work. I really think it is.
Eddie talked about Build Drum Brook Hill. We just said that, and that's basically what you're doing. And, our motto, theme, whatever, here at Brook Hill's Fun Connection in Jesus. And it's not a Brook Hill thing. It's a life thing.
It's a life thing. It really is.
And that's what you did with the middle school. Middle school want to have fun. They want to connect. And they do want Jesus when they've seen the fruit of it in your life. Yeah. Junior high's the same way. High school's the same way. Adults are the same way.
They are.
It's not, the gospel, I don't know, message or the way to present the gospel to others as Jesus did, he had to have had fun with the disciples. He definitely connected with them, and he definitely gave of himself to them, right? Fun connection to Jesus. It translates. No matter what, whether it's at your job in the way you connect with the people, or it's the ministry that you're doing, it works. Life on life mentor. That's what you've done, right? That's...
and it's one that it's not something that I ever sought out to do.
Sure.
It's something that certainly coming to Brook Hill and kind of seeing the methodology that as I now 20 plus years later, can recognize, hey, there is a methodology that was put in place that, and the time didn't recognize it. I've followed along with it. Again, the whole learn what's from before you or what's in front of you and teach what's behind you. I learned that along the way. Did I intentionally come up with that on my own? Absolutely not. Was the way that it was done? That was the model that was before me? Well, of course it was. So there was intention in that on how it was taught and demonstrated here. And so as you take that, it applies to, as you said, everything in life. When it comes to just Brook Hill itself, the gospel is the same regardless. The location, gosh, Brook Hill is a special place. This hill is a special place. There's so many things. God is everywhere. Yeah, the
He's
place
everywhere.
kind of matters,
Sure.
but it doesn't really matter.
Nope.
Because God is everywhere. And when he's living inside you, he's living inside you. So Brook Hill goes wherever you go. It's just you have to have that mentality of, hey, this is just, as one, I remember sermon years ago, still sticks with me now. It's like, no, this isn't Camp 7. This is Camp 285, whatever
right.
the number is at this point,
That's right.
You're just that much further down the road, and it's just the same thing over and over again. And you can't ever get tired of it. You always ask for that fresh wind. You always ask for God to keep giving you strength and keep moving you forward and keeping you focused. Now, are you fever pitch every time? No, you're not.
There's peaks and valleys.
There's peaks and valleys. But the methodology is the same, and you stay faithful. And that's all that God ever asks. He asks you just to be ready and available. And when he's ready to move you, you move, and you go for it. The opportunity came up in high school. Like I said, when I was first finishing as a camper, as a graduate, opportunity came up. God said move, we moved. And then God did a great thing in that city. And still, to this day, there's reverberations from that, just coming from Lake Charles, that still make it up to this place. Same thing, finally got to college. Got asked to moved. Made tons of connections there, new experiences, met just amazing people along the way. I mean, wonderful. And now different, here I am now, different phase of life for sure. Still working with youth, still enjoy it. And it's a new ministry, and God said, step up and move. And so we stepped up and moved. And now I'm working with youth again. So it's a lot of fun.
Once a camp counselor, always a camp counselor.
You are. I mean, really, it's fun. Amongst the family, everybody, my nieces, nephews, and everything, as they finally got together, as I was being introduced to the family and what have you, as our kids were growing up, it was always interesting because I always had more fun hanging out with the kids than I did the adults. And so for all the family gatherings and such, we'd get together and everybody would be like, don't worry about it, Camp Keith, he'll take care of all the kids. And we'd go outside and we'd have fun, and everybody had a great time, and it was just a whole lot of fun. And the adults stayed in the air conditioning. I'm out, and the kids sweating and playing and jumping on trampolines and all those kind of fun things. But none of the other adults would do it. So
no,
I had to. So.
I love that because here's the thing: Brook Hill was a place that helped us get going. But if you didn't take it from kind of borrowing someone else's faith to owning it yourself when you left, then that's why it was only at Brook Hill that you had it. But when you take ownership of your faith, right, then you can leave and start creating your own Brook Hill wherever you go. But, it can't be someone else doing it for you. And now, you need a Brook Hill until you really own your faith. You know what I mean? Where you have a real, Hetty would call it a real relationship with the Lord, right? Where you're reading the Word for yourself. And so I think you need a Brook Hill in your life to kind of be that until it's like, okay, I don't want to just experience that here. I want to live this all year long. And I know that was what Hetty was trying to get into us. And so you obviously took it, whether it was that, JCT year with Crowder, which, by the way, he's a pastor now in Colorado, which that is, by the way, Steve Crowder, that is Dave Crowder's brother. Yeah. Everybody knows Dave Crowder, the worship leader.
I think people have heard his name before.
They've heard his name, the guy with the beard with a raspy voice, right? Which Steve Crowder has the same raspy voice. He just
doesn't have the beard.
He doesn't have the beard, and he never cut a record. But they both did worship, and they both went to Brook Hill. But Steve's pastor in Colorado. But, obviously you said something clicked for you there, and you're like, I'm not going to just leave this at Brook Hill. I'm going to take it home. Mm-hmm. So this isn't going to be, hey, I'm just carrying my candle at Brook Hill. I'm going to be a light wherever I go. And it was almost like, I think God tugs on all our hearts. We just don't always say yes. But when you said yes in high school, it opened everything up for you. And I liked what you said. I don't know if it was college or high school, because I hear this excuse a lot, Keith. And the excuse is there are no other Christians at my high school, or there are no Christians at my college. And I think that's an excuse to stay back. Would you agree with that?
It's an excuse, but it's also, you feel that lived reality. You feel that isolation at times. You absolutely do. So I don't think it's a false feeling. I don't think it's a cop-out.
Sure.
I just think it's I don't know what to do, so I'm kind of throwing my hands up. And it's kind of that, you're in that phase of a little bit of paralysis where, okay, you can make a decision, right? You can make a Brook Hill, or you can just say, gosh, this is too big. And you can walk away.
Sure.
There's millions of individuals and thousands of Christians that probably have, thousands of Christians that haven't, and they said, no, I'm going to make a Brook Hill, or whatever variation. But you have to make that choice. But it is a lived reality, because that is how the enemy goes after, right? It wants to isolate. That's that lion's waiting for the one stray just to walk away, and then that's when they pounce. They're always there. It's always present. And that's when you're at your weakest. That's when you're at the most vulnerable, right? We're more solid as a community. We're more solid when you've got a cohort of people. And that's really what helped me a lot through college, that even though I wasn't going to a college that was filled with other Christians, going to a college that was filled with other people that went to Brook Hill, I had strong enough relationships and ties to the other counselors that I met along the way that I could call on any time that I had down moments. And I said, you know what? I know I've got friends. I know I've got deep roots. I know that even though I feel this way, I can rely on somebody to kind of back me up and kind of talk me off the ledge a little bit, and kind of, just sometimes you need a little pep, a little encouragement. You can't just muster it up on your own.
Absolutely.
And so you could reach out at any point. And I think that's a lot of the connections when you are working here at camp, or not even just here at camp, but if you're working in any kind of a ministry setting, I really think when you're really on a team that's intentional for a purpose that is for the kingdom, that really kind of bonds you with that other individual. And in doing so, I think there's so much strength in that. And I think that's where you can say, okay, that's where that, when the Bible talks about a cord of three can't be unbroken, when you've got a couple of people or one other person in God, right? That's a cord of three right there. That's some strong backbone that you can sit back and say, hey, look, I know the truths that are out there. I'm not feeling like the truth right now. It's kind of a dark place right now. But look, there's going to be another side to this. There's going to be something else. I got to stay faithful. I don't know what the end is. I don't know where we're going. But something's going to happen because I'm asking for it. And all they say is you got to ask. You have not because you ask not, right? So eventually, it took time. It did. You had to have a lot of patience with it. But eventually, it started out small, right? And it grew. Now, it wasn't hundreds and thousands of people, no.
Right.
But, you got 5, 10, 15 people to show up that you never knew before. And you're making these connections. And that took, probably 3 or 4 years by the time I was done at the college. And so anyway, that small little group, we had a good, solid group. It was fun. I don't know if that group still existed after I left, but we were trying to build a kind of a cohort of, hey, pass this on, keep it going. And don't know whatever happened to it, but I just felt like, hey, when I was there, I'm going to give myself to it. We're going to try to make it happen, and we'll see where this goes.
You know, I would imagine, I'd like to hear your opinion on this, but as someone who was a leader in high school and college, I know there's probably going to be people listening to this who are in high school and college that are feeling isolated. And I feel like that, like you said, the enemy wants to keep us all isolated. I feel like we're probably not the only one, right? Like somebody listening, you're probably not the only one in your high school who feels the way you do. You're probably not the only one in your college that feels the way you do. And they're looking for one to step up, and then they're going to go, oh, yes, and they're going to gravitate to you. Now, like you said, it may not be 100 people in your school, but it's probably 4 or 5.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously,
They're out
it's
there.
probably 4 or 5, and they're looking for everybody's nervous to take that first step. And was that your
Right.
experience that
Yeah.
when you took that step, other people were like, Keith, yes.
There's something there. Right. Yeah, I absolutely think there's something there. I mean, that's part of, the attraction to light. I mean, of all the imagery that happens throughout the Gospels, the light and dark and everything else, what are people attracted? People are attracted to light. That's what it is. Most of the creatures in this planet are attracted to light, right? So it's just like, okay, once you see that, you're drawn to it. Light draws a lot of people in. If anything, just out of curiosity. And so once that starts happening and then people kind of see where you're at, doors start to open a little bit more and more and more. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. It's always our encouragement. I mean, that was our encouragement that we got as campers. Let's go home and be a light, right? Carry your candle. You graduate. Go home and be a light. Because there are people that need you, right? And that's basically the way you've lived your life, which I love this podcast because everybody we talk to has similar stories wherever they are trying to be a light, which is literally the gospel message, right?
That's what it is.
I mean, that's what Christ sent out the disciples. He told them, go be a light, right? Go tell them the good news. Go tell them the gospel, And so, yes, you did it here at Brook Hill, but it doesn't stop here. And I remember Hetty or Steve, they would always say, don't let this be your greatest moment. Let it be your first moment, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that is. Yeah, you can't peak too early in life, right?
Right.
You shouldn't do that. No, this needs to be the platform on which you launch, right? That's where this needs to be.
Excellent.
That's the purpose of what this is. And so the training that you go through, whether you make it to staff or not. I mean, your camper summer years, your JCT years, your graduate years. Maybe you make counselor, maybe you don't. At the end of it, you've received the message, right? At the end of it, you've learned what it's like to live a life, at least for a week now. Again, thankfully for 2 weeks. But at least you've lived a life of what it's like or what it could be like as a Christian. And so take that same joy, take that same fire, take that same energy into the next thing that you're going into with God at your helm. That's going to make a difference right there. And that's going to, by itself, that's attractive. Because, again, that light starts shining inside you. People are going to get drawn to that. They might not know exactly what it is. Maybe you're very upfront with it. And they're like, oh, the Lord Jesus Christ lives in my heart. Maybe that's the first thing that you say to people. Maybe it's not. But they're just going to get drawn to you. And then next thing you know, people will start showing up out of the woodworking that you never even knew or realized.
I love that. If you haven't listened to Tyler Kemp's story, so Tyler Kemp, in fact, old Philip Bird over here, that's his youth pastor. So Tyler Kemp was on the podcast, and so you could go back and watch it. He was a JC for 1 week, and he said he doesn't think he was that good. That's why he didn't get asked back. But Tyler went on to become a youth pastor. Now was a youth pastor of my kids, was a youth pastor. I actually had the staff in staff training stand up if Tyler Kemp was their youth pastor. I want to say we had 10 to 15 of our current all-summer staff.
That's amazing.
That he was their youth pastor.
That's amazing.
I had no idea who he was. He got saved here, JC for 1 week, and then went off and
never saw him again.
And never saw him again. And he helped raise up this staff, not because he was trying to raise up the staff. He had nothing to do with Brook Hill since he was a JC.
That's remarkable.
But it was one of the coolest stories. And Philip wasn't even there. Philip's a JC. So here's yet another person who wasn't even in that room. And I've gotten to know Tyler, since that. In fact, he was walking past me in the crowd, and he goes, David Pate. And I said, hey, buddy.
Yeah.
How
are you,
sir? Sir? I didn't even know he was the youth pastor of the church, let alone because he had just gotten hired. And he began to tell me the backstory and all this stuff. And I'm going, this is amazing. He's like, I've named my kid after Brook Hill because I got saved there. But literally had nothing to do with it. But that seed was planted. And it's exactly what you're talking about. If somebody's listening to this and they don't become a counselor, that doesn't matter.
Christianity doesn't stop.
No. Brook Hill's not the place only to be used by the Lord.
No, absolutely not. You're meant to go out. That's the whole purpose. You're meant to go out. And again, whether you get extensive training through counselor training and everything here, whether you learn how to interact and handle tricky situations. Dealing with people is tricky. That's kind of my job now. Yeah, it's in healthcare and such, but you're dealing with health problems, which sometimes are tricky by themselves. But people in general, there's more to them than their health, right? When you're interacting with other students your age, other adults, when for those that listen to the podcast that are actually in the workplace at this point in time, there's always a deeper layer to the people that are around you. And the skills of the Christian faith, they kind of draw a lot of that to where you can recognize that, like a lot of people often will say, hurt people are hurting, right? They are people that if they lash out, there's something inside that's just not right. That's an easy opportunity that you can start praying for those individuals just by yourself. You don't have to inform them that you're doing it. It's something that you can just do. Right. Especially if you start having interactions. That's one thing that when I was kind of trying to figure out my path where I was going after college and such, worked a lot of different jobs in a lot of different settings, and I'm typically not in a Christian-based community, and yet that's kind of where I needed to be at the time, trying to be a light amongst other people. A lot of people, just because you show interest, just because you might say, hey, are you feeling all right today? That opens up a lot of things. And then that's when people can actually start to share a little bit more. And it can be real subtle at first. And you're just like, hey, you start making friends. You start making connections. You start just asking a little bit, more questions, maybe a little bit deeper and deeper and deeper. And eventually you might make a difference in that person's life. You might not. But at least at one point in life, that individual might say, at least somebody cared about me. And that might be your place in their story at that point in time. You never know what it is. But I went through a lot of different scenarios during that kind of transition phase that I was going through where, I met a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life. And, knowing who I served, knowing that this wasn't my end goal, knowing that, hey, this world is hurting. This, for a lot of people, this is a really, really dark place. I was very, very thankful that I had a direction, that I had a light, that I had a goal set before me, and I was going for it. And a lot of people don't have that same message. They don't have that same belief. And so when you have that and you do stand out differently, and so people will be drawn to that just by itself.
But even in those seasons where you were like, I don't know if this is my permanent job. You knew that it was kind of a temporary season where you were headed to a little more permanent season or a longer season. You were still present. It wasn't all about you. And I think sometimes when we are in seasons where we're like, this isn't it, I know God's taking me somewhere else, we can get so self-focused that we don't notice other people, which is, what was taught to us as counselors was to notice someone hurting, notice someone off by themselves, notice, see the need
watch
and
the
meet
periphery.
the need.
Watch the peripherals. Yeah.
That's it. Don't be just so into what you're doing that you don't see where someone else is out. And I love that, that even in that dark time, people need Christians. They need Christ followers to be like Christ, right?
Yeah, and you might not be sharing the gospel with them the whole way through. No.
But you're loving.
But you're loving. You're kind. You treat others with respect.
You say you matter.
You show, yes. And by a bare minimum, I think by doing that, you're showing that they have dignity. They're showing that, and you in your own mind, from a Christian's perspective, you know that is an individual that is made in the same likeness as God, as I am. Whether they know it or not, God made them that way. And so you're offering some element of dignity to them based on where they come from or who made them in the first place. And that, at a bare minimum, you always have that connection with another human. It doesn't matter what walk of life, what faith they're in. If they're older than you, if they're younger than you, you can always offer that element of dignity to them of saying, hey, look, we might not know each other all that well. We might not believe the same things, but you're made in the image of God just like I am.
And I think when we walk like that, I think people have to say there's something different about them. And as Christians, we should be different, right? We should be more loving. We should be more consistent because we're becoming more like Christ.
I mean, that's the goal.
It's the goal.
It's not easy. It's hard. It's tough.
Sure.
Some situations are easier than others. And that's that whole process that takes the lifetime. Yes, you saved. Yes, by grace, by faith, 100%. I'm down with that. But then it's a lifetime of the sanctification process. And, and then in the end, okay, great. Finally, I'll get a glorified body. That'll be the closest thing that I've got. Right. Until then,
right.
I'm not in a glorified body.
That's right.
I still struggle with sin.
That's
I
right.
have great days.
Absolutely.
I don't have the same patience I do every single day. I have more patience than others on other days. And you're just like, wow, I can offer this much more. I don't have that much to offer now. God make up where I lack. I don't know what to do now. Hey, I'm staying. I'm going to stay. I don't know where I'm going. I can only see that one step in front of me. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm still going.
Yep. Which even moments like that, I love what Craig Rochelle says. I don't know if you listen to Craig Rochelle's leadership podcast. Really good stuff. He's the pastor of Life Church. Like the Bible app. Mm-hmm. That's his church. They created the little brown Bible that we all have on our phone. Okay. That's Craig Rochelle's church. Yeah, they started that. Craig Rochelle says people would rather follow a leader who is always real over a leader who's always right. And I love that because, even when you're working with people or whatever and you mess up and you say, hey, the other day, I don't feel like I responded really well, and I want to apologize for that. I think there's nothing that shows your Christ-like, walk more than that, where someone goes, whoa, no one ever apologizes. No one ever admits they were wrong. No one ever says that they missed it, right? Our pride says that I can talk to you ugly and expect you just to, forget about it. And, I think nothing could even, like you were saying, we miss it. We're not there every day. But to me, there's no better witness than to say, hey, let me be real, that's my bad,
and I'll say the elements of my life that has shown me that the most is now being a parent, for sure. I mean, if there is some of the most sanctifying processes I have experienced as today, number one, being married. That is a way that will sanctify you in no other way. Meant to be holy for sure. But then also being a parent. There's times when I see in either of my kids the worst parts of myself, and I'm just like, God, wish you did not get that from me. Right? I know what that is, and I know where it's coming from. Gosh. Okay, I understand. And then there's other times when, I remember, especially with our firstborn, just listening as much as I could, going to as many classes as I could about parenting and how to do and what to do and whatever. Learning experience the whole way through. I was never privy to growing up in a family that had lots of younger people, younger than me, like quite literally the very first diaper I ever changed was my own child's. Like I didn't have like lots of younger nieces and nephews. I did those kinds of things. No. So that was a new experience for me from the get-go. And I remember initially hearing a lot of different talks, and they were just like, well, a parent should never apologize to their kids. And I'm like, God, that kind of didn't really sit all that well with me. As I've grown in that, there's been many times where I've come back and I was just exactly like you said, come back and just say, hey, buddy, hey, sweetheart, I'm sorry. The way Daddy said this or the way Daddy handled that wasn't the most appropriate way. I'm really sorry. Do you forgive me? I mean, that in and of itself, I hope speaks volumes. You don't always know as a parent what fruit is, what seeds are being planted, what fruit's going to grow from that or not. You don't really know. Yeah, you see things. They talk about parenting being a marathon, not a sprint. So you plan for the long game. So you don't know what seeds are being planted and what seeds are being received. And so, but all you can do is just show, hey, this is just what it is. And there are times. A very good close friend of mine just kind of put it this way. It was just like many times, especially as a parent, when here we are supposed to be not only just modeling good behavior, but in the context of Christianity, modeling a Christian kind of attitude or a Christian kind of perspective on things. When we're going through correcting phases for our children, sometimes we are acting in the most irrational unpredictable ways, and that's what we're demonstrating to them, coming from a perspective of I'm also the one that's supposed to be mimicking Christ-like behavior, and I'm acting so irrationally. What's their depiction of Christ going to be like? And that's a tough pill to swallow. And so there's so many times that I can see the sin that my children have, and you're just like, I hate that sin in your life. We're going to continue to pray for that sin, but gosh, it burns me up, and I wish it wasn't so strong already in their life. And you're just like, man, this is terrible. And so I will sometimes act sometimes irrationally, and it just doesn't make sense. And then I come back, and I have to make peace with God, and I just say, man, God, I really blew that. Here I am in a teaching moment with my son or a teaching moment with my daughter, and I just blew up all over. That didn't go well at all. And I pray to God that that's not the lasting impression that they have in that moment. And so I have to come back, and I have to redeem that moment. And so that's when coming back and just saying, buddy, sweetheart, I'm sorry. Daddy didn't do well. Do you forgive me? So many more words could be said, but sometimes that's all I can say. And there's times when that's just a really tough pill to swallow, where you just have to admit to, they often will talk about it's those that are close to you are the ones that you tend to hurt the most. The ones that live in your own household are the ones that you hurt. You give sometimes the best of yourself to total strangers, and by the time you get home, there's nothing left. And that's what you give to those that you live with every day, is just the scraps, when that shouldn't be that way. One verse that's always carried me back when I was a counselor, gosh, when the days get so long, you feel like you're at your wit's end, you just can't keep going. It's the whole God's strength is made perfect in my weakness, right? That's when his strength shines the brightest. That's when his strength really takes over. And that verse just comes back to me over and over again, especially in parenting, especially in marriage. It's, at the end of a busy workday, work in healthcare, our days are typically really, really long. So sometimes I'm just mentally, wiped. Some days there are times when I'm working with a bunch of patients in the hospital, and just emotionally you just see and hear so many stories, and you just feel wrecked for people that I can't believe they're going through all that. And to come home and you're just offering your spouse scraps, and you're just like, gosh, there's sometimes when I've sat in the driveway and I've like, God, you're going to have to fill me up for these next few hours, because I've got nothing left. And that's real. That's the love of my life right there.
Right.
And I need to give her my best, because I'm supposed to be Christ's example in this relationship. And there's times I don't have much left, and I need God, and I call on God. Not every time. No one's perfect. But I have to.
Man, it's so good, Keith. if people can understand that and hear that, and Kevin Ross talked about that, apologizing to your kids. Kevin is the one that I heard that from. We've Kevin and I have talked a lot back and forth of, Melissa and I would call and say, hey, Kev, Rachel, we don't know what to do. Give us some advice. They would call us, same thing. And so we were kind of the bounce back and forth off each other. But Kevin was the one where I heard that concept, because that is not an old school concept of apologizing to your kids, because the idea is that if you do that, maybe you're going to lower your leadership in their eyes. But it's so funny how that's such a deception, because the opposite. It raises yourself, because people know you messed up. And when you admit to it, it's huge. And, oh, man, it's so good, and it's so true. And I don't know, I think you have to be there to understand what you just said. Because I know that I felt like many times I gave my best at work, and because my work is ministry, your work is ministry too. It's just in the healthcare world, which I think your patients are, knowing you like I do and knowing your heart, you're the same guy in the Broncos years ago as you are, at your job. And I think in healthcare especially, people like you are so in high demand, that have a heart truly for people. And I think that's why it drains you emotionally sometimes, because you are trying to give yourself to people. But it's so true that we can get so burnt out in the people that we love the most. I mean, gosh, there's so much to unpack there of what you just said. It's so powerful, but it's so true of what, as parents, and I think that may be somewhat where the family is hurting today, is that our professions do get the best of us. And, I think that 2020 COVID summer slowed everybody down enough to where, I know for some people, if it was toxic, it wasn't necessarily helpful for people to go home. But for the ones who did want to be, did want to have a good family, did want to be a good mom or dad, did want to be a good husband or wife, you saw some of that unhealthiness flip back to health. And I heard a lot of people say, thank God for 2020 in that reference, right?
Right, yep.
And it allowed us to be more home and to do that. And it's so important. I love, there's a book called Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I don't know if you read it, by John Mark Comer.
Okay.
Pastor. I recommend it to everyone. He talks about Sabbath, and it's just a solid book. So, obviously, just like any book, when you recommend it, people are going to be like, I disagree with page 5, whatever. And it's like, okay, the concept is really good.
Get the idea.
Get the idea. Come on, guys.
Okay, that example was lame. I get it.
That's
but
right.
get
That's
the
right.
idea.
Yeah,
right.
And you don't have to do everything he did. But the whole concept was, don't get caught up in the rat race, because that's so good. Keith, I know that was something that, I got convicted of about 5 or 6 years ago of, whoa, Dave, where are you going? What are you building? And, it's important that, the most important people in your ministry is your family. And so I think it's very easy to get out of balance there. I know I've been there. I mean, I've been guilty of that, and we had to apologize to our kids for that. So I think that's so powerful. All right, Keith, couple takeaways here. So powerful. There's got so many things we could just unpack for days. Go ahead.
Is that an invitation? I get to come back another day?
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Next 2 weeks. Yeah, that's right.
Sounds good.
So let's give you 2 questions to end with. These are 2 open-ended questions. What has Brook Hill meant to you? And then, and you've probably already discussed it with your leadership, but maybe what is one leadership concept that you've taken away, maybe specifically from your time here at camp?
So what has Brook Hill meant to me, or what is Brook Hill to me? I see Brook Hill as a place where I guess right now I see it in 2 different lights. As a young person, this is a place where you can come, and maybe for the first time, maybe for the 10th time, you get a reminder of what it's like to live free in the Lord. Maybe you don't have a big group that's coming from your hometown, and you can kind of rewrite your own story, and you're here and nobody knows anything about you, your past, you can start fresh. And you can be the person that you feel like you can be when you're here. So as a camper, that's what I could remember for sure. Looking back, my wife uses the phrase, she has a lot of Ebenezers in her life. So the traditional use of an Ebenezer is a marking stone of saying, hey, at this point in my life, this made a change. This was a moment. It's like back when the Hebrews used to always build altars all over the landscape so they could walk around the city and landscape and say, I remember that altar. I remember that altar. God did this. God did that. So I would say Brook Hill's been an Ebenezer where I can go back and I can say, hey, look, this was a moment of my life that helped springboard me to another moment in my life, which then springboarded me to another moment in my life. And the central theme of all of that is a calling from God. So it's all based on God. But it's a moment, it's a marker that had Brook Hill not existed, God would have called me some way. I'm very thankful that God did it here because it's a very memorable place. But it is a springboard. It's a marker for sure.
I love that.
Is from a leadership standpoint, I would say a big takeaway that we always had was, and I think it was actually referenced in one of your talks that actually you had with Stephen Sexton a long time ago, or a relatively long time ago here on this podcast, where he said, look for the good in people before
see the potential before the lack.
Yeah. I mean, that is something that you can take into your career. You can take that into your school. You can take that into your family life. You can take that into your boyfriend, your girlfriend. You can take that into your wife, your husband. And you can take that into so many areas of life. Your boss. You can take that into so many areas of your life that the world is a dark place. Don't look for malice. Try to look for the good first. And when you look for the good, that's when you find the lights. There might be a little glimmer, it might be faint, but you look for the good first. And then if there is some good, you can work on that. You can fan a flame, and you can help a flame grow. Sometimes it's inside yourself. Sometimes you'll find that flame in others or those around you, and then you can build it from there. But it's looking for the good before anything else.
So good. Powerful, powerful stuff right there. Well, man, Keith, we appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Glad to be here.
And so Keith DeSonier, Broncos Legacy.
Broncos for life.
Broncos for life. I love it. Life, legacy, and leadership with the Keith DeSonier. Thanks for being on here, man.
Thank you.